this great nation will endure as it has endured, will revive and will prosper.
These images are from the Great Depression of the 1930s, a period of immense adversity and privation. Hopes lost, fortunes eroded, generations destroyed within a span of a few years, a record number of people inflicted by post-traumatic disorders, and unemployment soared to unimaginable levels. In the US, nearly half of the banks collapsed, 20,000 companies went bankrupt, and 23,000 people committed suicide. Perhaps the world at the time of the Depression never thought that it should be in a like situation ever again. 90 years forward, we are proven wrong, as the infamous coronavirus shatters the global economy. Millions of people will enter poverty over the next 1 year. These trends are more obvious in Asia, South America, and Africa, where economies were already fragile. In the more developed economies, social distancing has marred the natural ability of the labor class to move freely in search of their wages. This means more layoffs, low manufacturing output, and inflation that should bite the wallets of the common man like never before. As part of this short documentary, we were lucky to have a word with renowned French journalist and author Claudine Lou Tourneau d'Isson.
Bonjour, je suis une écrivaine et journaliste française, donc sortie d'un confinement de 55 jours. Et nous voici à l'aube d'un monde nouveau peut-être, mais en tout cas cette période de 2 mois où beaucoup de gens ont été obligés d'arrêter de travailler, où beaucoup ont été contraints de travailler, comme tous les infirmiers et les médecins, va apporter, je pense, des changements dans cette société. Le premier, c'est que malgré les aides massives du gouvernement pour soutenir une partie de la population, à partir du 1er juin, toutes ces aides vont s'arrêter et qu'il y aura à ce moment-là une vraie dégringolade économique et qu'on va se retrouver avec énormément de gens sans emploi. Malgré tout, cette crise sanitaire, espérons-le, va ouvrir les yeux sur un monde différent qu'il est nécessaire peut-être de repenser, c'est-à-dire un monde avec moins de mondialisation, moins de production et surtout moins de surconsommation.
Fragile states who were already grappling with higher debts and a poor healthcare system should most certainly be faced with very hard policy choices. As per the IMF, the US economy should shrink by 6% this year, compared to 7% contraction in the Eurozone and 5% contraction in Japan. Can the health and economic risks be sensibly balanced? The risk of returning to work and school will not fall to zero until an effective vaccine has become widely available, or until the population has achieved herd immunity. In both cases, that would probably take a year or longer. See what Kasser Nassim, a leading investment banker from the International Finance Corporation, has to say about the crisis.
Well, yes, indeed, this pandemic or this crisis, of course, is unprecedented. It's still evolving, I may add, and the impact is also still evolving. If you recall, we started off with predictions of $1 trillion worth of erosion of global GDP. This was by the IMF. Supposedly, the institutions which have a finger on the pulse of world economy, and they were so out in their predictions. And it then rose to 2 billion and then 4 trillion and then 6 trillion. And today it's close to 10 trillion is the estimated erosion of global GDP. That's about 9 or 10% of the global GDP. The IMF also qualifies their predictions with saying that this might actually be a very rosy picture and very optimistic, and the real scenario may actually be worse than that. So yeah, it's unprecedented. In terms of your question on the impact, so like I said, it's still evolving, so we're not really sure what the final impact is going to be. But one thing is for certain, that this is not an impact on a segment of the economy, on a sector of the economy, or on a particular country or even continent. It's a global crisis and impacts the world economy globally.
Clearly, even when the pandemic completes its tenure and ceases to be a threat, its effects would have permanently altered the world we live in. The major question is, what will the future economic and political systems look like? Are we looking at less globalization, less trade between nations, and more internalized economic regimes? As per certain reports, the global economy should lose more than $1 trillion this year, but might show some improvement next year. The worst sufferers of this crisis will be the small-scale industry. See what Naeem Khan, a Cambridge University economist, has to say.
Small businesses are an important part of the economy. They grow into the behemoths that we recognize in the FTSE 100, NASDAQ, and the economy more generally. I mean, let's not forget that Jeff Bezos started Amazon in his garage. As well as being important future sources of growth, small businesses are also sources of employment for millions. In the US, nearly 50% of all private sector jobs are in small businesses, whereas in the UK it's at 40%. Having said all this, during an economic crisis, small businesses are usually the first to feel the impact. That's because they usually don't have access to the same level of cash reserves nor credit lines as their larger corporates. Recognizing this, and in response, the US and the UK governments have this time round put in place special policy measures designed to get credit to small businesses. There is of course an operational challenge of trying to get helicopter money from bank balance sheets into small businesses, but it is something which should be manageable. Turning to after the economic crisis and after the creative destruction process has taken place, where we can expect many new firms to come about and take the place of these other new global behemoths. For instance, following the last crisis, WhatsApp, Uber, and Instagram are now all household names.
So, does this mean that our world's going to change forever? Will we genuinely recover from the setback? Or will we head towards bigger disasters? For instance, following the Great Depression of the 1930s, there was a surge in xenophobic and isolationist political approaches, which eventually led to the Second World War. We already live in a world which has become an oasis of disasters, peppered with fascist and xenophobic ideas, a world threatened by climate change concerns, extremism, depleting natural resources, and a rise in global poverty. Does this mean we are heading towards our own extinction? Or is this a final warning to mend our ways and make this world a better place? It is imperative to note that this pandemic bears two very vital problems that deserve immediate attention. First, we have invested too much capital in high production industrial development at the expense of climate change. And second, we have invested too much in the arms race at the expense of healthcare and education. Even now, at the height of this pandemic, global military expenditures continue to hover in the range of $1.5 to $2 trillion. Ever imagined what the world would be like if even half of that cash goes into education, health, and poverty alleviation? Let's take a look. There'd be millions of jobs in the health industry. Above all, we'd be more equipped to handle pandemics without much alarm. There'd be more cash for research and development, more scientists produced, more teachers, more entrepreneurs who might bring in more innovative approaches towards managing the future economy. Food crisis in Africa can also be controlled. You'd have more libraries, more artists, more thinkers, a more productive media. But it brings us back to the same questions. Do we really want a better world? And do we have the will to think differently? Please share your feedback in the comments section below. Like the video and share it as much as you can, and most importantly, subscribe to our channel BJ Sadiq by clicking on subscribe and the bell icon so we can continue bringing you more interesting content. Thank you very much, and see you soon.